Hey, what's going on, active duty passive income nation, aka ADPI nation? It's your host, Kevin Brenner, coming up with more fun ways to keep myself entertained, obviously. But today's guest, who is also incredible, is going to be talking about something that I think is really actually super serious. So if you're a long time listener to the podcast, you've definitely listened to episode 275, where we brought on Dr. Mark Gordon, who is a neuroendocrinologist, and we talked about suicide, depression, and TBI, and how different the research and science and behind hormone therapy. Well, we're bringing on some more doctors because I float in the circles of doctors, mainly because they're smarter than me, and I always want to be the dumbest person in the room. And Dr. Jeff is much, much smarter than me. So Dr. Jeff Donatello, he's taking it from a different angle, where Dr. Gordon was talking about neuroendocrinology, which is hormones, right, and how they affect the brain. What Dr. Jeff specializes in is stem cells. So we've heard about this probably from the mainstream media and stem cells and like, ooh, what does that mean? And it's just like a whatever. Well, the reality is that stem cell technology has improved vastly over the last 15, 20 years, and it's becoming more and more and more accessible. And oh, by the way, it works. And Dr. Jeff is going to be talking about that, what that means, breaking it down for us. So, Dr. Jeff, thank you so much for coming and speaking to the military community on the ADPI podcast.
Hey, Kevin, I'm glad to be here. I don't know. I think it's probably up for debate if I'm smarter than you, but there's a lot to unpack in a short period of time. And we're here to kind of maybe open people's minds to a whole world where, we don't have all the answers, but things are happening very quickly when it comes to longevity and regenerative medicine. And I'm here to share what I've learned. So it is an area that I'm passionate about. And, I love to help people improve their quality of their life. And this definitely can help many people do that.
Yeah, that's awesome. So let's and you're definitely smarter than me, but let's just go strip it down to the bare basics. What is a stem cell? What does that even mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's a building block of to be a human being. It's what we use to differentiate, to other different cell types, so that we can have our organ systems develop in utero and we can become human. So the body is made to continually be regenerating tissue um, until we die. Right? Your liver, you get a new liver every 6 weeks. You get new skin every 6 to 8 weeks. We regenerate tissue constantly. But that process slows down. It's a process called senescence. Our cells get closer and closer to death, and we don't live forever. But there are things we can do now we're pushing the envelope. And some people, controversy is all over the place when it comes to this. They say that we can live to maybe 150 years old. I don't know for sure. But I do know that I've seen over 3,000 patients in our offices up here in New Hampshire and over the last 5 or 6 years. And we are definitely helping people live healthier and more pain-free than they ever could before. And that's fun to really to help people do that on a daily basis.
Yeah, and we met through GoBundance, the joint mastermind that we're in, and you took the stage in Tahoe at the recent annual event, and you were talking to just about this, and it was just like melting people's minds. It was just like, wait, this technology even exists? Like, we've heard about this stuff, but up until that point, personally, I was like, oh, well, that's just like way out in the future. Like, we're like, it's like one of those things you hear about, like flying cars and stuff like that. You're like, oh man, such a cool concept. And there is one flying car out there, like in a museum somewhere, maybe that some prototype. But this technology is actually becoming practical almost
It
to
really
help out.
is.
It really is, and
It
it's cool. So the stem cell being, like you said, that building block of life. Like, where do they come from?
So again, back to unpacking this whole world. It's very complex, and if you go online and you Google this, you're going to get a bunch of garbage answers. I always have my cell phone here because I like to see. This is the iPhone 14. All right, you go online, you're going to see stuff that looks current, but it's actually like a flip phone. Okay, that's how fast things are changing. We've
Wow.
been in this industry now for 6 years, and what we did 6 years ago and what we do now really is very different. So to answer your question, what we feel is the best regenerative biologic product is using purified amniotic fluid. Now, that's for joints. There's many other things you can do for other applications. You can get deep into this. But for now, we're talking about if you're sitting here listening to this, you're saying, how can this help me or someone I love?
Mhm.
And especially if you're a veteran, my dad's a veteran. My dad suffered with shoulder pain. He hurt himself playing football at UNH in 1967. He was one of my first patients. He was always my gym teacher that threw sidearm, right?
Yeah.
And because he couldn't put his arm over his head, my father got full range of motion back in his shoulder, and that's when I knew we were onto something. We went kayaking with him down in Florida, and he was paddling. And I said, "How's your shoulder?" He said, "What shoulder?" He forgot that he had pain. So,
Wow.
does everybody get results like that? No, but the majority of people get results. And here's what we have to realize, Kevin. This is what we've learned. There's a few factors. You want to make sure that you have a product that's made by a scientist that really knows what he's doing. The FDA has clamped down on these labs. There's a lot of poor players in this semi unregulated, they try to regulate it, but the regenerative industry has a lot of poor players. People, these labs are popping up, and the FDA, what they've done that's been really good is clamp down the labs. They're audited. They're made to make sure that they're doing everything properly. And I work with a lab and a scientist, Neobiosis, Dr. Ian White. He has a PhD in stem cell therapy, and he's been around Cornell, Harvard educated. I've been with this man using his product for 5 years. I've been to the lab. I bring doctors to the lab. I've seen the product, and I know it's well vetted out. So that's number one. You want to make sure that you have experience with the person that is actually injecting the product into you. You know where they're getting the product from. Very important. The next thing is we want to make sure that we have an exclusion inclusion criteria that's super tight. What does that mean? If early on we would take any and all comers, right? You want to
Mhm.
do this? We'll inject you. Um, we found that the more comorbidities people have, okay, remember from COVID, comorbidities or other pathologies. So
Sure.
if a person has a high body percent body fat, right? They're obese, they're type 2 diabetic, they're hypertensive, that the results all go down. Okay. So we want to, in our office, what we do is we have a full functional medicine setup where we'll bring them in and we'll work on their inflammation prior to injecting them. And we try to get the inflammatory markers down. We look at their full metabolic panel. We look at all the blood markers we can look at, markers that you're not going to get from your traditional doctor because the insurance company squeezes you, right? If you've ever been to the VA, you
Ah.
all know they
Yep.
squeeze you. They're going to do a CBC. And a lot of times it's not worth the paper it's printed on. It's looking for things that have already happened. And then they say, oh, you have markers that are scary. Now we'll give you the upgraded blood work. Okay. So a lot of times we'll have people come in that aren't super healthy and we'll try to get their blood work done. We can give them specific supplementation to clean them up. We'll do a full hormone panel. We'll look at stress hormones, cortisol specifically, this released by your adrenal glands in response to stress. And then we're also going to do food sensitivity panels because if you're sitting there and you're in pain, quite frequently it's because the foods you're eating, not just the simple carbs and the sugars, but it
Mhm.
could be gluten, dairy, soy, egg. We don't know. Those proteins can cause inflammation in joints that will give you pain that can easily be remedied by the right diagnostic testing and the right follow up with the proper nurse practitioner, health coach, doctor. I hope that
Wow.
makes sense.
No, no, it does because when I was talking with Dr. Gordon a couple episodes ago, he had mentioned the same thing. He was saying
Yeah.
he's like, "Listen, you go to your doctor and you go and get the blood test and we've all gotten labs, whether you're active duty and you go down to, the immunizations and labs clinic or you're out and you go to the doctor and you get just regular checkup labs. Yeah, they show you like cholesterol level and like it's like really basic stuff, but he's like that doesn't tell you anything for the future. That tells you things that have happened in the past already, just like you said. So it's interesting that you guys are both aligned there. And the reason is it makes sense. It's because the business of medicine, they want to, they don't want to pay for that advanced labs. So they just won't until they deem that something is wrong enough with you. You're broken enough to afford this, this extra care. But what we're looking out for here is a little bit different. So bringing the conversation back to stem cells, Dr. Jeff, the applicability of these, if that's even a word, using these, like you use the example of like your father's shoulder, right? Your father was in relatively good health. He wasn't like obese. He didn't have all of these different inflammatory markers. So once that baseline has been achieved and those inflammatory markers are, what we can help about the person besides their like family history and stuff like that has been helped, then what other applications for stem cells, because what we're talking about is we're in your father's shoulder specifically, were you were regenerating muscle or what?
Yeah, let's back it up a little bit. Okay. What we want to do is we want to do a good case history. Our nurse practitioners that are trained, my job is to train them, get them out where they understand how to do this all around the country, bring them back in. We have people that actually fly in every week. GoBundance is big when it comes to that. We have people that fly in to get care. What they're going to do is do ultrasound guidance and actually look at tissue to see where the damage is in the tissue. Then they're going to inject purified amniotic fluid. So let's back it up a little bit. This is called allogeneic donor derived biologic. And what that means is this: a woman somewhere has raised her hand in a hospital setting and said, I have a C-section coming up. I'd like to donate my either umbilical cord, placenta, or in our case, amniotic fluid. So back it up
Oh.
even more. The amniotic fluid is what protected you from your mom's disease, from your mom falling. It's how we have advanced as a human species over 2 million years, 80,000 generations. It's what nature has handed us to thrive and survive before we are put out into the world. So what happens is we get that amniotic fluid, we pull it out. A cord bank does that. It's sent to a third party for testing. It's tested the same way our blood supply is tested under FDA guidelines. Then, this is the trick: the scientist, in our case, Ian White, PhD, will then go to his lab and he will take out what he needs. And what are in that, and this is where it gets a little bit deep science wise, but hang in there. These 250 billion of these little bubbles, they're called microvesicles. And what they do, that's mRNA, messenger RNA, and microRNA. And what that does, in short, it makes your immune system work and it turns on proteins. And
Hmm.
that's how we come out of our mom ready to take on the world, skin super clean, right?
Hmm.
Awake, alive. So what we put in you is not, there's no cellular product, there's no DNA. It's 250 billion microvesicles per cc is injected where the damage is. Okay, so for like a knee, we would do, my cat's here in the background, so you have to.
No, they should be walking across the keyboard right now. That's about right. Oh, you're
Well, I
busy.
have to tell you, I have post traumatic stress because I did one of these once, and I went to knock her off, and she scratched me in front of I don't know how many thousand people. So, so
Don't
I
touch
see
the cat.
so she snuck in here, and
She's testing you right
I
now.
yeah, I've been pushing her off. She comes back. So, anyways, you might see Maggie come back. So back to where we were before we were distracted by this little lady. The reality is, it's injected back in under ultrasound guidance, and
Mhm.
these microvesicles, they target inflammation. They go right after that inflammation. So if you are a person who's older watching this and you have joints that are in pain, there's probably arthritis in those joints. So the best results are going to be from an arthritic knee, shoulder, hip, back, neck, wrists,
Mhm.
ankles. That's really where our bread and butter is. We inject it in, and it basically will start healing up very quickly. Some people feel results like that. My father-in-law, I always tell the story. He limped into our office. He walked out, and he swears up and down he hasn't had an ounce of pain since then. And that was an arthritic
Wow.
knee. That happens about 20% of the time. The average person, Kevin, will notice a 50% change over the next 6 weeks. And then
Wow.
over the next 6 months, the average person, so let me go back, 90% of our clients get a 60 to 80% reduction in symptoms. And that's one and done. So we don't have to keep doing it.
Mhm.
Now, it depends what they do after. Everyone asks me, well, what happens down the road? I always say I had this beautiful crystal ball a few years ago, and it broke, it smashed. I
Uh,
can't predict the future. Going back to my dad had almost 100% function. He tripped on a log at my brother's house in Lake Placid, landed on his shoulder, and wrecked everything.
oh no.
So it depends on how you take care of your body. What type of stress do you put yourself under? What's your diet like? What do you do? How do you take care of it? And that's really the results. They're driven by how you respond.
But the exciting, there's so much to unpack in what you just said. The exciting part that you mentioned, just if we practically talk about it, you're telling me that if you have a knee pain or joint pain or something, like say like you said, like your bread and butter is healing or helping regenerate arthritis and solving those problems. Someone who has pain 7 days a week within 6 weeks can have pain 3 to 4 days a week. That's huge. That is
Oh
like
yeah,
that's
yeah.
incredible. And to continue to improve, like, that is super, super incredible, the science side of it. And then kind of taking it back one step further on what you said about, the science and the amniotic fluid. I mean, are a lot of people, are they donating? Like when women are about to give birth, and I don't have any children, so maybe this is just part of the process. Like when you're signing paperwork, do they sign and say, "Hey, I'd like to donate this," like you're an organ donor on your license? Is that the kind of the deal?
Yeah, there's 12 cord banks in the country, from what I've been told. We are not lacking for
Hmm.
this product whatsoever. And it's because one person can give us 200 cc's, and we
Wow.
put 1 cc in the knee. We'll
So
put
so
two
one
cc's in.
yeah, so like one person can potentially have 200 knee treatments.
There you go.
Wow.
Exactly.
That's
Yeah,
crazy. So the
I
like
know.
and it's all natural, obviously. There's, it's not like coming out of stuff. And then when you mentioned kind of how the mRNA side works, we were talking, it kind of reminds me of the COVID vaccine, and how the COVID vaccines
Yeah.
are mRNA based to target the protein and to disable it on the virus, and to prevent it from replicating. And it's kind of like that, but instead of, it seems like the stem cells are helping. They're helping get, regenerating this tissue. What other applications are there besides shoulder, knees, stuff like that?
Yeah, so the cellular tissue that we used to use, some people still do, that's from the cord. It's called MSCs, mesenchymal. They call it stem cells, but they're actually signaling cells. They're not a classic stem cell. That application, the problem with that is it was really large. It was 1,000 times bigger than the acellular product. So in short, to answer your question, the purified amniotic fluid will get through the blood-brain barrier, and it'll have a systemic effect. It'll get to your brain, your spinal column a lot easier. We don't inject it personally in our office or anywhere that I know in the US unless it's under a scrubbed in anesthesiologist situation. We're not injecting into the central nervous system, but
Sure.
this is so small that it crosses through your whole system. So sometimes people will do infusions. The biggest thing is the FDA doesn't want us to make claims that we're treating anything specific, which
Hmm.
is that should be that way. There's, again, back to the poor players, the evil people that will take advantage of Mrs. Smith and say, "You have Alzheimer's, we're going to fix you. It's 100 grand." There are people that do that.
Yikes.
So it's the Food and Drug Administration is there to help food and drug um, problems. This sits outside of that, but what they do well is that they're really trying to, I think, protect us from the people that advertise and rip people off. That's kind of where they're at.
Yeah.
So yeah,
It's funny that it reminds me, I went to school in Miami, and I forget what, at one point when I was in school, there was this big news story in Miami, and it was like these garage plastic surgeons, right? Kind of doing the same thing. Be like, "Oh, well, you don't want to pay for, your fake butt or your fake this or your fake that. I'll just do it in the back of my garage," and everything in Miami. And this one poor patient went there, and she got like Fix a Flat, like the stuff for a flat tire,
oh yeah,
injected into her butt. And that was like the idea. And then she's like, well, it's all lumpy and rocky, and now I have all these medical problems. And she was trying to sue this guy who fled the country and had no money. And it was just like, one, what are you thinking? But it was just like one of those like viral news stories. And we're just like, you're mentioning these like doctors who are like, oh yeah, you fix Alzheimer's, 100 grand. Like it's like sketchy stuff like that. So it's good that someone, a government watchdog, is regulating the space. But I have to imagine that it's like it's kind of like a fast moving target, because the science is changing and the applications are changing. And with my experience in government, it doesn't change so quick. So where's that
yeah,
gray
Kevin.
area?
You get what you pay for, and do your due diligence. Don't go to any doctor where you haven't Googled him. Jeff Donatello, Google me. You're not going
Yep.
to see anything. I've had almost 10,000 patients. My background's in chiropractic. I retired that license years ago. But I'm proud to say that we do things above the board. So wherever you go to, whether it's me or somebody else, it doesn't take long to do a Google search, and bad
Hmm.
stuff pops up. And go somewhere else. Use your intuition. And also, if you're getting a deal, sometimes you end up getting what you pay for, which might lead us into the cost of this. Why isn't this mainstream?
Hmm.
Right? Well, right now, it's for us to do a knee in our office is $4,000 plus, right?
Hmm.
And people that are sitting here, they want to throw stuff at the radio or their
Yeah.
TV or their computer because a lot of people in the VA, maybe they don't have the money, and it hurts. We give discounts to veterans that come in our office, but still, it's a very expensive thing. So the question that a lot of you might have is, well, when can I get it? I don't have enough money. When can I actually have this? And that really what's happening is the FDA requires all the labs to go through an IND, an investigational new drug. They need to be making drugs out of this, or they won't let them float. And
Wow.
then once the drugs hit, the FDA can control it. And now you have some side effects, which isn't cool. But the masses then will now get a regenerative product that will be controlled by insurance companies and the drug world, which I don't know if that's better, but I think it overall it's a good step, and that's where humanity really can be helped. I think.
Right, right. So, oh, that's super interesting. So, like, because obviously, we're this is kind of like a real estate podcast, but to learn about kind of the big pharma implications. So, the FDA, they regulate a lot of things, but they're best at what it sounds like is regulating pharmaceutical companies. So they won't even let this stuff hit the mainstream until it's made into a drug. So you're saying that in most likely situation for the future 10, 15, 20 years in the future, we could see some sort of maybe stem cell pill or something, a stem
Yeah.
cell drug
Yep.
before the mainstream, before you go to your local IV therapy place and get stem cells put in you. That ain't happening at an affordable level before the stem cell pill is out because that'll be regulated and produced. Is that kind of like is that soon ish? Or
Yeah,
can
I
you
think
never
it all
know?
depends on the administration that's in there. I
Sure.
think every administration has a different goal, right? And I know that sometimes Republicans they jack up the military, right?
Mhm.
Then the left people get in and the military drops. I think that I don't know for sure. Again, back to the crystal ball, but I would say this: until the drug companies have their hands on it, we cannot say that we are treating anything,
Right.
right? And the reality is this: it's extremely safe. I've had almost 3,000 patients, probably more, in our office. Nothing. And people don't. Sometimes they look at me like he's lying. Nothing. We've
Mhm.
had the only problems you can have is if you have a dirty product, which we never have, or if the nurse practitioner or doctor puts a needle in the wrong space, which they're trained to under guidance. Um, some people, if you get a really, really sick person, they might feel their immune system gets jacked up and they might feel upset, like stomach upset, but that's rare nowadays. So really what it comes down to is what we use is excessively safe and way more safe than pharmaceuticals. But the reality is we're in a world where the insurance companies and the drug companies control everything. And here we are in the United States. We're not a healthy nation, Kevin,
Yeah.
by any means. And it's
That's true.
sad. It really is. And this is a perfect example of if you have the money. Someone said the other day on a podcast, little side note, he
Mhm.
said, if you look back at all the monarchs and kings and rulers in history, a lot of them lived a long time, especially in the
Sure.
last 150 years, because they had the best access to everything,
Sure.
right? I mean, when Trump got COVID, he disappeared. And all of a sudden he had hydroxychloroquine or ivermectin or whatever he had, and Trump was better in like a day. So
Yeah.
this is the problem. The people with money tend to get the better care, and people without it don't. And it's a sad state of affairs, but here we are. It's really
Yeah.
tough.
Yeah, that's where capitalism and healthcare intersect. A lot of people get screwed. But kind of continuing that line of thought in that conversation, Jeff. We talk a lot about the VA, and and obviously there's healthcare benefits. A lot of the listeners of this podcast. They're either active duty, so they're using TRICARE, right, as an insurance provider, or for me, I'm a reservist, so I use TRICARE Reserve Select, or I can go into a VA clinic because I'm a disabled veteran. But like, from that perspective, there's always a lot of complaints about like what the VA can do and the VA, the process and getting in and out. Is there a future where, people who may have, I don't know, shoulder pain or back pain or something could be service connected, might not be service, whatever, like not getting into the whole dispute about like, oh, don't take my disability check away from me thing, but like from an overall healthcare thing, like my personal opinion on the matter, and this is maybe unpopular Kevin's opinion, I personally would much rather be living a pain-free life than collecting a disability check for something that I have pain for. I would much
Yeah,
rather give the money back in like literally 100 times out of 100. I would give the money back, uh, and I would choose the pain-free life like that. And that might not be how everyone on this podcast thinks about it, but kind of morphing this this rant into a question for you.
Yeah.
The the like, is this technology something that you anticipate uh, being used in the future to help active duty or veterans who have these
Yeah.
problems that are service connected?
I certainly hope so. I think, they say write your congressman or woman, right? The
Hmm.
whole goal of me being on talking to someone like yourself is to put it out there that there is this available. When hopefully someone's hearing it and they're going, well, man, how do I get this done? And I've had some people come in my office, active duty people that were all about writing and letter campaigns, and they were sure they were going to get it covered, and they got knocked down. But these are early adapters, right? These are
Hmm.
early people. I think as it starts swaying, so right now, about 3 to 4% of the general population in the US, they understand what we're talking about. Once that hockey stick curve hits 18%, then the general populace knows that there are things out there. I mean, right now, I would say 3/4 of the people listening to this think they still have to go to Tijuana, Mexico to get
Hmm.
these products. I hear it all day long.
Yeah.
They don't have to. My dad was exposed to Agent Orange when I was 2 years old in Vietnam, and he had some really serious issues. And from age 68 to 75, he had a lawyer for almost 8 years trying to get disability. And my father's, he's an Italian immigrant who came here when he was 11 on a boat. He does not stop. And that's kind of where I got my relentless from. And he and this lawyer fought for 8 years to get him full disability, and he finally
Wow.
got it at like age 76. But he said, Jeff, it was not for the faint of heart. And he's a smart guy, and he had to stick with the fight. So circling back 360, it's a battle. It's a battle that every individual has to step up, and if they're going to get change, the change starts with you. And again, however political change happens, whether it's calling your congressman or woman, or calling up Mr. Biden, I don't know, it's something that it's a difficult thing, especially when the VA sometimes doesn't have the best people working there, and it can be very frustrating medically. Um, from my experience, I've struggled with the VA over the some of the doctors. It's been very difficult in the Northeast to work with the VA, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's not an easy place from someone who's been damaged representing our country, right? It sucks. Excuse my French. They're there to help, and we're here because of veterans, right? Or we'll be all speaking German.
Yeah.
I firmly believe that, and we're not, and we don't give them what they need. So I wish I could make it cheaper, even, but it's an expensive process that we go through. So yeah,
Yeah. No, and yeah, hopefully things do change. I'd like to transition the conversation into getting more practical, kind of results based things like and applicability, because I think it might be a little difficult for some of our listeners to really understand the benefits of this. So we talked about what they are, what the stem cells are, where they come from. They come from the amniotic fluid. And pretty much, from one birth of a child, you can potentially harvest up to 200 cc's, and one knee treatment is 1 cc. So there's tons of this amniotic fluid that's out there, right? So long as it's able to be stored properly,
yep,
and collected and stored. So, like, what other ailments, have you been able to help people with, just the general
yeah.
population?
Great question. The biggest surprise by far, and not many people know this, is if you do an infusion, and we're not treating this condition, but if you do an infusion and put these into the vein, they're going
Hmm.
to go straight to your lungs and your heart. And what happens if you have COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disorder, like emphysema, chronic bronchitis,
Hmm.
pulmonary fibrosis? These get right into the lungs and they get gobbled up, and they take the inflammation out of the lungs very quickly. There's nothing like what I've seen. I've seen people, we've had about 35 or 40 people in our office that have breathing difficulties over the last 5 years that are night and day different.
Wow.
So that's a big one. If you do suffer from COPD, and it really frustrates me because an infusion does make a big difference, but we can't claim that we're treating that.
Sure.
So that's one thing that's helped a lot. Um, Off the top of my head, I think if you have like an autoimmune disorder, you're not going to get a whole lot of results. That's where we go back to our functional med,
Hmm.
working with our nurse practitioners, getting the inflammation down, looking at those stressors, right? So I want to make sure that people don't think this is a panacea where it just helps everything, right? it really, we have to look at our overall health. And there's three things: there's chemical, physical, and emotional stressors that lead to diminished longevity, right?
Okay.
So, an emotional stressor, if your boss is a jerk, if your kid is in jail, if you're
Hmm.
going through a divorce, your cortisol, stress hormones are spiked. That creates a situation where you have a pro inflammatory response potentially, and you're going to have more pain,
Hmm.
right? It's an emotional stressor. If you have a chemical stressor like gluten, dairy, soy, eggs, maybe you haven't been tested and you don't even know it, and you're eating gluten all day long, that causes joint pain for a lot of people. So you don't even have to go through this process of injecting stem cells.
You could simply
The
just
reality,
change your diet, and then the pain goes away, and it's like, oh, look at that.
yeah,
The more you
Kevin,
know.
it's everything. We've had in the last month, I think we just had an office meeting. We've had three insulin dependent type 2 diabetics that were obese on multiple medications get off all their meds, including their insulin, in 6 weeks and
Wow,
lose 20 to 40 pounds.
that's
So,
incredible.
diet is everything, food is medicine. And I want people to take that away. Yeah, this whole regenerative biologic stem cell thing is cool, but food is the way to get healthier, period. The end.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I just looked at a presentation. A buddy of mine is in a similar mastermind called YPO, and it's similar to GoBundance. I mean, and he sent me a presentation on biohacking. They just had a meetup, and he sent me the slides. And I mean, it was incredible, this stuff. And to take this slightly off tangent, but just like how sugar is in everything and kills us, and the preservatives kill us, and the American diet, like you said, is we are in a very unhealthy country, like very
Yeah.
unhealthy, and it's sad the way we're built, like freedom, right? Like you can choose to eat a million calories a day and blow up to a blimp and die of a heart attack. That's your right. As an American, you can do that. That's your
Yeah.
choice if you understand food. And I love what you said there, Jeff. Food is medicine. If you understand food, and you can begin to understand sleep, and all the different like basic things that a lot of us take for granted, that spike like you said, those emotional stressors and those hormones. One, you'll get a better quality of life. You might get even subsidiary effects of, I don't know, reducing pain that you've had, and that pain just disappears, and all this stuff. But it's the basic things in life. You won't need to see Dr. Jeff because you're going to be okay. Now, in the event that you do have something, that you have an injury, Dr. Jeff can help. So other, injuries and things like, besides knees and arthritis, is there anything else that
Sure.
the stem cells could help?
Yeah. So, the younger you are, the quicker you're going to heal, right? Once you get to
Hmm.
be 40, 45, 50, 60, if something hasn't healed up in about 6 months, it's now the C word comes into play. It's chronic, and you're
Mm.
probably not going to get better. So, if it's a soft tissue, a tendon or a ligament, a meniscus, cartilage, those are things that if you've had an MRI and they say to you, you're not a surgical candidate, or even if you are a surgical candidate, we've had over 300 people, Kevin, that have rescheduled knee replacement surgeries. They didn't have to do them. We kept track early
Wow.
on, 300. So, but outside of that, to answer your question, if you have a rotator cuff issue where it's painful, and it's just not getting better, then we would look at it under ultrasound guidance. We'd see what type of tissue's torn, and a acromioclavicular joint separation or something. Shoulders are big
Hmm.
because people use them all the time. So there's really, we're talking about soft tissue that just hasn't healed. But can I go back up a little bit more? Just back
Of
it up
course.
because
Of course.
I do want to make sure that people understand. I always look at someone like trying to take something away from this that they can apply, right?
Yeah.
So one thing, if you're drinking soda or diet soda on a regular basis, and you're in pain, I will guarantee you, if you cut that cold turkey, you might go through withdrawals for a day or two, but a week later, your pain will go down maximum 75%, minimum 25%. You will see a 50% reduction if you have a soda habit and you're high in sugar. In 1 week, you will see a diminishment of pain. Watch it. It happens to me when I eat sugar. This mountain bike injury of my finger hurts more. So the
Wow.
people that are drinking 16, 32 ounces, and you know who you are if you're listening to this, as simple as
Listen up, you
cutting that
diet
out.
cokeheads. I know where you're
Yeah,
at.
it's as simple as cutting it out. But here's the problem: people aren't happy post COVID. They're depressed. A lot of
Yeah.
people, it's the only fun they have. but it's that quick little sugar high, that mouth candy that occurs. And then they don't realize that there's a downside, which is nature's way of kind of depressing you afterwards so that you'll get another hit. And it's this cyclic thing they go through all day because they're emotionally not served by their world around them and they
Yeah.
haven't connected to people. So it's a complex thing to unravel.
Yeah, it's I was thinking about when you're talking about that with the soda that I used to my last job at the Pentagon, I was briefing the 3 and 4 star generals of the Air Force, and I was their meteorologist, right? So we'd go up and do weather briefs and all this stuff. And there was this one general, this 3 star, and and these briefings are like 6:30, 7 in the morning, like early morning, right? And all the other generals, they have their cups of coffee or tea or whatever. And she had two uh Diet Cokes, the 16-ounce bottles of Diet Cokes. And I was just like, oh, and by the end of the meeting, she'd be through like one and a half of those things. And the meeting's like 30 minutes. And I'm like,
Yeah.
holy smokes, I know this isn't like, I know you're going to get more of these. Like, this is terrible, but I'm not going to tell that to a 3 star. It's not part of my weather report.
Uh,
Ma'am, as you can see across the country, their diet is terrible.
mm.
I
So
can't
the
say
number one
that.
thing, the worst thing you can do for your health, the worst thing is chemicalized drugs, heroin, cocaine, crystal meth. We know this. Number two is smoking. We know this. Number three, in my opinion, is diet soda.
Wow, that is crazy. You were talking diet soda in the same conversation as heroin and cocaine and
It's the
crystal meth.
next
That's
step
nuts.
down. It'll
That,
kill you long term if you're
that
addicted to it.
that is crazy, and again, food is medicine. So we're talking about stem cells here, but we also got Dr. Jeff talking about food because this is important stuff, and these are things that we just overlook. Whatever we're on base and we're going to, every Popeyes that's on every military base ever. Maybe reframe that decision. Maybe pack a sandwich and a salad in a lunchbox and have a glass of water instead of that soda. You'll begin to feel better. So, man, Dr. Jeff, this is awesome. So we talked about so much of the applicability of stem cells and kind of the where the research is going. I think it's time. I got to take you into the bonus round, dude. It's like we're
We
running
have
out
a
of time.
bonus round.
Oh, we
I
got a
didn't know we
bonus
had
round,
a
baby.
bonus round.
Oh, we got a
I'm
bonus round.
scared.
It's
I'm
the
scared.
same 4 questions I ask each and every guest of the ADPI podcast. Are you
All
ready
right.
to be stumped?
I'm ready.
All right. Question number
I
one.
have no clue what you're going to say right
I
now. It's
know.
good.
What book or software has really been crushing it for you lately?
Software, none. A book I read on vacation last year, How to Win Friends and Influence People. This book was written
Mm,
so many years ago, and
hmm.
there's a new version of it. And I went nuts on vacation and took notes. And I took away from that all people want to be heard and to feel important
Yeah.
and to be listened to. That's it.
Yeah. Why do you think I started
So,
this podcast, man? I make people listen. No, I was playing.
so that's my book, How to Win
uh,
Friends. And I'm reading Count of Monte Cristo right now. So if you want to get an old time novel, deep, deep reading. I love reading. I'm always reading 5 or 6 books. So
yeah, that's incredible. And that's a great book. So we're gonna have the link to that book in our show notes to get How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's a classic. Um, Question number two: who's your biggest hero and why?
I go back to my dad, right? My dad was born in China to a Russian mother and an Italian father, entrepreneurs. They owned movie theaters before the communists kicked him out in the mid 40s. He lost 2 siblings in China to disease. They lived in a bombed out shelter in southern Italy for 6 years before he was 11 and they came to the US on a boat, owning nothing, speaking Chinese, Italian, and Russian. And it's a crazy
Wow.
story. But he has motivated me and he's entrepreneurial. And I think I was raised by a really good man and a good lady, and I'm very fortunate. So, yeah. And my mother, we'll give my mother, they're both my heroes. How's that?
Listen, there's no wrong answer to these questions, and that's what makes them fun. Lightening up a little bit here. Question number three for you, Dr. Jeff. What do you like to do for fun?
You know what? I love mountain biking. I love
Ooh,
getting out. I love taking my dog and getting out. And I'm in New Hampshire, and we mountain bike in the winter, and I do a lot of mountain biking in different places in the summer. I've been doing it for 30 years. I used to race bikes, and it's a great way just to chill out. And I listen to podcasts too when I'm out there. Find people like you. It's a great way to
uh,
become educated and chill out. That's what I do.
that's incredible. I love that. All right, so final question for you. usually this question kind of sounds like, hey, what three nuggets of real estate investing experience could you kind of help people with? But this is a special podcast. So, what I'm going to ask you is to summarize kind of what we talked about in three nuggets, or however many nuggets you want to share with people, just about stem cells and how the military and veteran community should think about this, from whether it's applicability or just how they should consider this technology moving forward, and the longevity of stem cells. So three nuggets on stem cells,
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, I think number one, the future is now. This is available if you can afford it. And that's the downside, right? If
Hmm.
it's outside of your scope of your dollar, your pocketbook, um, talk to people that make the laws. Really start screaming. The future, every change you want comes from you. So that's important. I think that if you do have the budget and it's in your world, I think talk to a provider that you trust. Try to find out. I mean, my job is to get it out there to other people around the country. I have providers in different places that do what I do that I've vetted out. So if there's somebody close to you, um, we can find that person for you and you can get some help. That's important. Number three, regardless of all of it, to reiterate, you can get healthier just by drinking water instead of diet soda. Get that habit of cutting down the inflammatory foods. You can feel good next week. Easy. It's
Hmm.
up to you. It's right here. That's it.
It's all mental. It's that behavior, and it's changing those habits that you've developed, and that and honestly, that capitalism and big food, if you will, I don't know what you call it, that they want you to develop, the marketers out there in the world. So that's awesome, Dr. Jeff. I mean, this technology is so exciting, and when you talk to smart people like Dr. Jeff or other folks in the industry, and you see what's going on and you hear more of these testimonials, and it's just incredible. It's almost like, what I think about with all of this is like, X-Men with like Wolverine, and he gets like hurt, and then it's like he just like thinks, and it heals up. Like, that's what I'm thinking, and we're not far off from that. It's not that. It's completely different than that, but like that that is when you were first on stage in Tahoe, and I was thinking, I was like, oh my god, like, are we like kind of getting close to this? Because that's crazy. This regenerative medicine, it just seems so far off. But like you said, the future is now. That's awesome. All right. So for folks listening to this who want to get in touch with you, Dr. Jeff, and they want to reach out, and maybe, who knows, maybe they're local to New Hampshire, and they could go and see you in person, like, how can they get in touch with you?
I like giving out my phone number. I have no problem doing that. It might be crazy, but a lot of people listening. It's 207-451-7438. Send me a text. I'll send you my Calendly link, and we'll get a time where we're both available and we can talk. And centerforwell.com, center, FORWELL.com. That's our website. So you can check that out too. We're 1 hour north of Boston in scenic Portsmouth, New Hampshire.
Oh, fabulous! So you're just kind of outside of Boston, and there's some military bases up there. Hanscom is a Air Force base that's up in Boston, so there might be some listeners there that could be interested in learning more about this. So, bold move, giving out your phone number. I like it, though. See how
Why
it plays
not?
out for you.
All right. I'll have to get a new
No,
phone number maybe, but
yeah,
hey.
maybe, I don't know. But yeah, guys, we're gonna have that in the show notes. So if you didn't catch it, you can either rewind and listen to that, but just scroll down, look at the show notes, the information to get in contact with Dr. Jeff. Go on his website. It's all going to be there for you. Remember, the future is now. This technology is out there. It is available. And if you're interested and you have pain and you think this can help, just book a call. You never know. Maybe it could be as something, as like, oh, you just change your diet or you do something else and that's going to solve the problem. Maybe. But the more you know, and I guarantee you don't know what you don't know. So if you have a question, reach out. That's it. That's why we have this podcast. Neither myself or Dr. Jeff right now is here for his health, right? So like,
Exactly.
so
Exactly.
we do this to get the word out because it's important for the military and veteran community. So Dr. Jeff, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm sure we will talk again soon in the very near future.
Kevin, it was fun. Thank you for the opportunity.
All right, we'll see you next time.